parents would say, stick a pin right there. Revenue Authority. On the one hand, I understand what the expectations are of the Minister of Finance. You would understand it too, because you talk about, a revenue authority that is going to do greater collection. However, we are losing a lot of time because infrastructurally we're not ready for that. Are you now looking in the interim then of an increased aggression from the inland revenue, or are we making this mistake of waiting for this revenue authority?
Well, I certainly hope that the country is now waiting until the infrastructure or the statutory arrangements are in place for a revenue authority. I mean, there's no need for that. There's no need for that in order to improve your tax collection.
Indeed.
What is required to improve your tax collection is for the tax officers to do their work
Mm-hmm.
and to be vigilant, for the VAT officers to do their work and be vigilant. You hear stories all now about the increase and reduction in VAT. You hear stories all now about how people are. You saw on social media receipts from enterprises that clearly showed 15% VAT was being charged after the 12.5% came into place. The question is, what have the authorities done about it? Nothing, as far as I know. I've not seen any reports, but I saw on social media no less than about 5 or 8 examples of this, and which to me was sufficient evidence to bring people to book.
And we hear it here at the station. It is one of the reasons that I've been advocating on the morning show that we've got to get a labor force out there of Pricewatch inspectors, not just to say there is a discrepancy here, but to start handing out, levying some fines.
That's right.
Bringing people to heel. Unless you do that, you're going to have those who, one, as either the Prime Minister or the Minister of Finance said, businesses are operating for a long time and for some reason have endless trade, but for some reason or the other have been unable to declare a profit. Yep. I mean, you're going to have that, and you're going to have those, the parasites as they were, because that's what they are, who will continue to extract from those who can least afford it, extract from the nation's coffers money and go away. So yes, I am hoping that the Inland Revenue, in fact, can find ways to do that. I have not heard of an expanded workforce to do this. Have you?
No, I haven't at all. And you see, this is one of the ways in which government may find that certainly the public perception of it could improve a lot, particularly those who are displaced, because many a times those who are displaced will argue, look, we're being asked to carry this burden while life goes on normal for others. And it seems to me that if those others, in particular businesses, are made to pay their way by a much more efficient tax collection system, that it's not that it will put additional money in people's pockets, but it certainly will improve the government coffers and certainly will improve government's capacity to retain employment and to retain some of these social programs.
Economist Gregory McGuire is my guest here, usually as in the case when we spoke to the Deputy Commissioner of Police. Usually the best time for you to plan things is when you have the luxury of proactive planning as against reactive. What we are looking here is a very difficult situation, and folks are saying, here is the reality, we understand that, while there is lip service, while it is echoed that jobs will not be lost, jobs are being lost every moment, and there is pain on the immediate horizon. You concur with that? And if you do, how much worse you think it can get looking at the factors, the economic factors that confront us?
Yeah, what is going to happen is a domino effect. I mean, I've been saying since last year that we've not felt the recession yet. People are saying it, but we certainly didn't feel it yet. All Carnival went by, Christmas went by, and I didn't hear any businesses complain that sales were lower, and therefore that is my indicator that people won't begin to feel the thing. All right. So first quarter is going on now, and we are beginning to see the signs, and the domino effect has started. So perhaps ArcelorMittal is the classic example where they provide material to Centrion, and they've shut down, and therefore Centrion has shut down because Centrion can't afford to purchase material from outside to continue operation. They're not going to purchase this in any event to continue operation in this nature of the steel market. And this kind of rationalization is going to go on. So it started with the oil companies for whom the collapse of prices, they were the first to be impacted by it. And if we were to use that, we will see that the next to be impacted by it is certainly going to be the government. And that's why you keep, notwithstanding what the Prime Minister says, you're going to keep hearing of contracts not being renewed. You're going to keep we've already heard of cutbacks in several ministries. I think the first number they were given was 15%. Now someone told me that they were being asked to cut back by 25%. Cutbacks mean capital expenditure cuts as well as operating expenditure cuts. Operating expenditure cuts typically will mean workers and contract workers, and projects can't go forward and so on. That is going to impact, obviously, those people who live and by supplying government, because if government isn't buying the way it should be, then you got your little stationary concern, and you yourself will cut back. There are firms in this country whose very existence are dependent on government. Somebody called them tender entrepreneurs, which means that their survival depends on winning a government tender. And so with less tenders and less government activity, it means that the decline is going to spread into these areas. So what we're looking at certainly going forward in 2016 is going to be more job losses, more fall in production, more fall in output, and so on. And now there is hope. There is hope in some areas. Certainly, one of the good things about a fall in oil prices, or what's supposed to be a good thing about fall in oil prices, is that the region, the markets in the region, all of a sudden get some fiscal space, and so they could purchase more because they have less to spend on oil, or they have to spend less on oil, and therefore they could purchase more goods. And Trinidad and Tobago, our manufacturing sector, in fact, has dominate the CARICOM market space, and therefore there is hope there that manufacturing ought to be able to expand capacity and so on. The problem is, though, and I don't know the numbers, but the problem is, though, that so much manufacturing over the last 14 years have converted from manufacturing to simply importing, that capacity, in my mind, is not what it was, say, 15, 20 years ago.
The Heritage and Stability Fund has been in discussion. Stability, very tough times. An area you mentioned there. If, in fact, what was the manufacturing has now become an importer, and now you must reverse that. Do we have the wherewithal, even if we had to draw down on a stability fund, for instance, to encourage this? Is that one way, one look at balancing this situation?
I would not use take that avenue. I would not recommend that avenue at all. I think that the markets are lucrative enough. The CARICOM market is, if it's growing, if in fact the economies of those islands pick up as a result of the lesser oil burden, I think that's sufficient. That ought to be sufficient incentive for people to expand capacity and move forward.
Okay.
Now,
keep your stability fund for paying your bills and so on and running your governments.
Yeah, you have. I think government has enough burden as it stands, and there are already sufficient incentives in place in terms of capital recovery and so on to incentivize the manufacturing if indeed they need to expand capacity. But and let me take the opportunity to make this point, because you hear in conversations in Trinidad and Tobago that the world is in recession and therefore we in recession. I want to say that is not true. the world is not in recession. Oil exporting countries are struggling. Oil exporting countries are experiencing a reduction in revenue, a reduction in output as a result of the problems with the oil and commodity markets. The world is going fine. The United States is experiencing growth that it hasn't experienced in 5 years. Just last month, I think, the Federal Reserve declared the United States, said that Obama has now officially turned around the U.S. economy.
For a lot of folks, and that has been made clear for some time, and you're quite accurate, a lot of folks look at what is going on, a hiccup and or a slowdown in China, and saying it is the effect of that because of the demand, that's causing a problem in the world.
And because China was growing at 9, 10, and sometimes 12% over the last 20 years or so. So when China gets down to 5% growth, everybody's, wondering about the impact it have on the global recession. So, I got to that by saying, I expect with low oil prices that the other economies of CARICOM are going to have an uptick. And therefore, there's an opportunity there for Trinidad and Tobago to take advantage of that. That's all I'm saying, and to therefore improve our export earnings, or certainly reduce the rate of decline of export earnings.
Yeah, I like the point and see exactly what you're saying, because if countries are paying less for oil and its byproducts and so on, they have more money to spend, and of course. Yeah.